Let's go to the future, noobs. To the year 2120. Real estate development will look very different by then, because the industry has the potential to make more technological progress in the next 100 years than it has in the past 5,000. Before we go time traveling, let's take a brief tour of the history of construction. There have been 4 major waves of technology so far, starting with the agricultural era. Between moving out of caves to the 19th century, buildings were made of wood, stone, and concrete. Actually, the Romans got ridiculously good at using concrete, but their recipe was lost for about 2,000 years after the empire fell. There were plenty of variations in architectural designs, but technology for the most part was limited to stacking things in a way they wouldn't fall down. The second wave was the Industrial Revolution, introducing new materials like iron, steel, and artificial cement combined with steam and electric power. This enabled us to stack things way higher than before, with the first skyscrapers emerging in the 20th century. We also added new innovations like air conditioning, elevators, and curtain walls. The third wave was the Information Age, where basically every other industry raced ahead except for real estate development. OSHA started making construction sites safer though, so there's that. Now we're at the dawn of the fourth wave, defined by AI, nanotech, biotech, and robotics. This wave will have profound implications on what, and more importantly, how we will build buildings. If we time travel 100 years into the future, we can take a look at how each step of real estate development has changed. By then, humans will be genetically enhanced with the ability to amplify their physical and mental abilities with robotics and AI. Autonomous robots of all shapes, sizes, and functions will be everywhere. Nanotech should lead to some major breakthroughs in energy, thereby lowering the cost of robots producing stuff to almost nothing. Supposing we don't self-destruct by then, and supposing the singularity doesn't result in the enslavement of mankind, we will be a godlike species, capable of telekinetically commanding swarms of robots. My job will be completely eliminated, but I'll also be dead by then, so unemployment will be the least of my worries. Furthermore, I'll have been on basic income towards the latter part of my life anyway. I believe money itself will also disappear at some point, but that'll take much longer than 100 years, so projects will still need to be funded. But figuring out the highest and best use for a particular plot of land will no longer be speculative. It'll be a group decision between city government and the landowner, heavily guided by an AI. The AI will be able to draw upon unthinkable amounts of data, making precise usage predictions and optimizing construction plans for it. The AI can draw on data down to the individual level to predict housing needs in a city with frightening accuracy. In 2020, companies like Zillow already have massive data repositories. They're taking the first step towards precise predictive power. The plans would be instantly code compliant, so no need for a buildings department or expediter to go back and forth to review things. Because the AI is also capable of design, so humans don't even have to get creative unless they want to leave their own personal mark. In 2020, companies like Reonomy, Envelope, and Upcodes are taking the first step towards digitizing code compliance. The plans will also account for available funds and future cash flow, and a banking AI could come up with an interest rate that precisely reflects the risk level based on the predictions. Digital smart contracts can be drawn up within minutes, with total pre-development time taking maybe a couple of hours. Biotech advancements may allow contracts to be tied to your DNA, so you're on the hook for life. In 2020, FinTech has already taken a few big steps towards entirely digital transactions. There's too many companies working in this space to name. Once the humans come to consensus, construction can start. A swarm of autonomous nanobots, construction bots, and drones will break down and reuse materials from the existing building, or source new materials. Then they'll assemble the design precisely to plan within a matter of weeks, if not days, depending on the size of the building. In 2020, companies like Boston Dynamics and Built Robotics have made the first steps. And MIT Media Lab is producing a lot of research on swarm robotics that's not commercially viable yet. Brokerage will be totally gone, I hope. But never underestimate the power of the National Association of Realtors. They have resisted the information age. They may use AI to resist the fourth wave and keep their 6% commissions. But anyway, living situations can be a lot more flexible in 2120. Most of the population will be living in cities by then, and the sharing economy will have evolved 3 full generations. People just won't be very emotionally attached to stuff anymore because it'll be more commonplace to use things without owning them. People can of course choose to stay in the same place for their entire lives, but if they move, they'll be able to save their preferred dwelling unit configurations and bring it with them to whichever buildings they want to go to. This is a radical concept, so let me explain some more. The planet will be overpopulated with astounding levels of inequality in 2120. even though there will be a handful of trillionaires, quality of life will be pretty good for the entire population, because the fourth wave will be able to provide a minimum level of basic necessities to every person at almost no cost. As a part of those necessities, we may see something like a right to 400 square feet of living space, with families being entitled to larger spaces. If these spaces are standardized across new buildings, people could save personal configurations like the size of rooms, layouts, wall colors, and furniture. Remember, entire buildings can be built in weeks, so apartments can be reconfigured by nanobot swarms within hours. If your apartment configuration can be brought with you wherever you go, it really changes the concept of a home. In 2020, Airbnb is taking the first step towards this, and they just raised a few $1 billion in an IPO. They have an R&D lab called Samara, and they're constantly dreaming up concepts like this. I've also mentioned Ori, a robotic furniture company that makes transforming walls so your apartment can easily take on different configurations. And a small percentage of Airbnb users have already adopted a nomadic lifestyle by bouncing from home to home with no permanent address. For today's Womb, I recommend The Future of Humanity by Michio Kaku. He discusses how the fourth wave will help us leave Earth, build bases on the moon, and terraform Mars. We'll need all the construction technology I talked about in order to establish Martian cities, by the way. But he covers a much larger scope, about how we could possibly develop warp drive, travel through wormholes, and become an interstellar species. And ultimately, we may transcend our own bodies and become immortal. It's thinking like this that'll help us build a roadmap to the future and recognize which technologies will get us there. Stay curious, noobs.